Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So, statistics say that 60% of women take medication for mental illness, which means 40% aren't taking their medication. So, in a mental hospital, a madman chases the senior doctor with a knife. The doctor runs for his life until he gets to a dead end. The madman stops and says, "Take the knife. It's your turn to chase me." So a new patient had just been admitted to a mental asylum. After the usual paperwork, one of the doctors decided to get to know him. The doctor pulled up a chair and smiled. "All right, let's start with something simple. What's your name?" The patient sat up straight and replied confidently, "John F. Kennedy, sir." The doctor raised an eyebrow and muttered under his breath, "Great. Another one who thinks he's the president." But before the doctor could write anything down, the patient quickly waved his hands and said, "Oh, no, sir. I'm not the president. I'm the airport." So in a mental hospital, a doctor was making his daily rounds, checking on the patients. First, he stopped by first patient's room. The man was sitting quietly, reading a book. The doctor smiled. "Wow, you're improving." Patient one looked up and shrugged. "I'm just reading a book, doc." The doctor nodded and moved on. Next, he visited patient 2. This one was sitting at a desk, scribbling furiously. "Wow," the doctor said. "You're improving too." Patient 2 looked confused. "I'm just writing a poem." Feeling encouraged, the doctor continued down the hall until he came to patient 3. This man was perched on top of a table, perfectly still, with his arms stiff at his sides. The doctor blinked. "What on earth are you doing?" Patient 3 looked him dead in the eye and said, "Doc, I am a lamp." The doctor sighed, grabbed him by the arm, and helped him down from the table. But the moment his feet hit the floor, there was a loud groan from the other 2 rooms. Who the hell turned off the light? So, in a mental asylum, a doctor was doing his morning rounds when he passed by the first room. Patient 1 stood up proudly and declared, "Doctor, I am a messenger of God." From the next room, patient 2's voice rang out angrily, "Liar! I haven't sent you anywhere." So I was driving past a mental asylum when all of a sudden my tire comes off and rolls down the hill along with the nuts. I was so angry I started cussing on my way down the hill to collect the tire because I couldn't find the nuts, which grabbed the attention of someone in the asylum. He said, "I seen what happened. Why don't you take 1 nut from the 3 remaining tires and head into a repair shop?" I was surprised. It was a good idea. I asked the man if he worked at the asylum, and he said he was an inmate. I asked what he did, and he said, "I can't tell you, but I can show you." He said, "I have been working with grasshoppers, and I think I have an award-winning theory. Watch this." The inmates pulled out a matchbox and opened it. He then said, "Jump out," and sure enough, a grasshopper jumped out. I was so amazed. He then said, "Jump in," and sure enough, the grasshopper jumped right back into the matchbox. I said to the inmate, "That was really impressive, but it doesn't explain why he is in an asylum." The inmate said, "You didn't let me finish." The inmate picked up the grasshopper and pulls off its legs and lays it down. "Jump in, jump in." "See," said the inmate, "my theory is if you pull the legs of a grasshopper, it goes deaf." So a man had been in an insane asylum for several years, and according to the staff, he was completely fine, ready to return to normal life. All that stood between him and freedom was one final check from the doctor. The doctor sat across from him with a clipboard, smiling in a reassuring way. All right, the doctor began. Just a simple question. What would happen if I cut off your left ear? The man thought for a moment and then answered politely. Well, sir, I suppose my hearing would be much worse. The doctor nodded approvingly, making a check mark on his clipboard. And, he continued, what if I cut off both your ears? Without hesitation, the man said, well, sir, then my vision would be totally gone. The doctor froze, his pen hovering over the paper. He sighed heavily, shook his head, and motioned for the orderlies. Take him back to the ward. We'll reassess him next year. A year later, the same man sat across from the same doctor in the same little office. If I cut off your right ear, the doctor asked, what would happen? My hearing would get worse, the man replied calmly. And if I cut off the left, then my vision would be totally gone. The doctor rubbed his temples. Back to the ward with you. This went on year after year. Same office, same question, same answer. Until one day, after yet another failed evaluation, the doctor finally snapped. He slammed the clipboard down on the desk. Why? Why do you keep saying that? You know exactly why you're here. You know if you just give me the right answer, you can walk out of here a free man. So why on earth do you insist your ears have anything to do with your vision? The man leaned forward, speaking slowly, as if explaining something obvious. Very simple, Doc. If you cut off both my ears, my hat would fall down and cover my eyes. So, in a mental institution, a nurse walks into a room and sees a patient acting like he's driving a car. The nurse asks him, Charlie, what are you doing? Charlie replied, driving to Chicago. The nurse wishes him a good trip and leaves the room. The next day, the nurse enters Charlie's room just as he stops driving his imaginary car and asks, well, Charlie, how are you doing? Charlie says, I just got into Chicago. Great, replied the nurse. The nurse leaves Charlie's room and goes across the hall into Bob's room and finds Bob sitting on his bed, furiously jerking off. Shocked, she asks, Bob, what are you doing? Bob says, I'm screwing Charlie's wife while he's in Chicago. So the doctor is having a test on his patients to see if they are already fit to go back on their normal lives. So the doctor drew an imaginary door using crayons on a big wall to see if the patients can distinguish a real door or not. Then the doctor said, who wants to go outside? Pointing at the fake crayon door. Me, 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 said all the patients. The doctor was disappointed that all of his patients are not yet in the right mind, but he noticed one patient guy at the back laughing to his fellow patients. The doctor thought he might realize it was a fake door, so he walked towards him and asked what's so funny. The guy said, they all think that they can pass through that door. The doctor was surprised that this patient is cured because he can able to see it was a fake door. But still, the doctor asked why they can't possibly pass through that door. The guy answered, that door is locked. I have the keys in my pocket. So during a visit to the mental asylum, a visitor asked the director what the criterion was which defined whether or not a patient should be institutionalized. Well, said the director, we fill up a bathtub. Then we offer a teaspoon, a teacup, and a bucket to the patient and ask him or her to empty the bathtub. Oh, I understand, said the visitor. A normal person would use the bucket because it's bigger than the spoon or the teacup. No, said the director. A normal person would pull the plug. Do you want a room with or without a view? So a doctor at an insane asylum decided to take his patients to a baseball game. For weeks in advance, he coached his patients to respond to his commands. When the day of the game arrived, everything went quite well. As the national anthem started, the doctor yelled, "Up nuts," and the patients complied by standing up. After the anthem, he yelled, "Down nuts," and they all sat back down in their seats. After a home run was hit, the doctor yelled, "Cheer nuts." They all broke out into applause and cheered. When the umpire made a particularly bad call against the star of the home team, the doctor yelled, "Boo nuts," and they all started booing and catcalling. Comfortable with their response, the doctor decided to go get a beer and a hot dog, leaving his assistant in charge. When he turned, there was a riot in progress. Finding his tizzied assistant, the doctor asked, "What in the world happened?" The assistant replied, "Well, everything was going just fine until this guy walked by and yelled, 'Peanuts.'" So a new guy starts working at the local mental asylum. After giving him some general indications, the director tells him to ask any question he may have. "Yes, director, I have one. How do we know if a patient is cured and ready to leave the asylum?" "Well," says the director, "once per year, we gather some of them and ask them a question. If they answer it correctly, then they are cured and are free to go." The director gathers 3 patients for a demonstration. "So, resident 121, what is 6 times 6? 1,000, says the first one. "Well, no, that's another year here for you." The director proceeds to ask the second patient the same question. "Well, the answer is February." "My God. No, it isn't. You are staying here 1 more year." Finally, the director asks the question to the third patient. "What is 6 times 6? Obviously, it's 36. The director cheers the third patient and proceeds to communicate the asylum staff he is ready to leave. The new guy asks the patient before he leaves, "Good job answering correctly. How did you know it?" "Well, it was easy. I divided 1,000 by February." So my uncle is mentally ill and has been in a mental hospital for 2 years. The doctors noticed that he seemed to be doing well, so they decided to discharge him. Before signing the discharge papers, the doctor asked one last question to my uncle, just to make sure. The doctor asked, "If you put 3 sacks of sugar in the ocean, will it be sweet?" My uncle said, "Of course not, Doc." The doctor said, "Very good. You really are good to go." My uncle whispers, "But 7 sacks would." So a 90-year-old man goes for a physical, and all of his tests come back normal. The doctor says, "Larry, everything looks great. How are you doing mentally and emotionally? Are you at peace with God?" Larry replies, "God and I are tight. He knows I have poor eyesight, so he's fixed it. So when I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, poof, the light goes on. When I'm done, poof, the light goes off." "Wow, that's incredible," the doctor says. A little later in the day, the doctor calls Larry's wife. "Bonnie," he says, "Larry is doing fine. But I had to call you because I'm in awe of his relationship with God. Is it true that he gets up during the night and poof, the light goes on in the bathroom, and when he's done, poof, the light goes off?" "Oh, sweet Jesus," exclaims Bonnie. "He's peeing in the refrigerator again." So I was walking past a mental asylum and heard chanting coming from behind the fence. I stopped to listen, and they were chanting 8, 8. I found a hole in the fence to see through, and a finger poked me right in the eye. Then they began chanting, 9, 9, 9. So a man in a mental health facility was arguing with a hazelnut. "I'm not crazy. You're crazy," he says. The squirrel chimed in and said, "You're both nuts." So there is a mental patient who believes that he is dead in the mental hospital where he is admitted. Therefore, does not eat and does not participate in any vital activities. Could not be convinced that he is not dead despite all the efforts made by all expert psychiatrists. One of the psychiatrists, who understands that the patient will not give up on this decision and undertakes his treatment, finally asks the patient a question about whether the dead can bleed. The patient says, "Of course, it doesn't bleed, because all life functions of the dead have stopped." Then the psychiatrist takes a small needle and sticks it into the patient's finger. The reaction of the patient, who looked at his finger in surprise for a while and saw that it was bleeding, is interesting. He blurted out to himself, "Damn it, the dead bleed too." So a Soviet official is visiting a mental asylum. To prepare for the visit, the asylum trained the patients to sing glory to the Communist Party. When the official arrives, everyone is singing their hearts out. The official is very pleased. However, he notices a woman not singing. The official approaches the woman and asks, "Why aren't you singing?" The woman replies, "I'm a nurse, not a patient." So the sun beat down on the weathered dock where Captain Riley's fishing boat bobbed lazily in the harbor. The air smelled of salt and diesel, and the gulls overhead squawked as if they knew trouble was coming. An IRS agent, dressed in a stiff suit that screamed city, stepped carefully onto the pier, his polished shoes out of place among the fish scales and rope coils. He clutched a briefcase. His mission clear, Captain Riley was suspected of dodging proper wage payments to his deckhand, and Agent Thompson was here to get answers. Adjusting his tie, Agent Thompson approached the grizzled boat owner, who was untangling a net with hands tough as leather. "Captain Riley," the agent began, his voice sharp and official, "I need a list of your employees and how much you pay them." Riley wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against a crate, squinting at the agent like he was sizing up a fish too small to keep. "Well," he drawled, "there's Clarence, my deckhand. Been with me 3 years. Good kid. I pay him $1,000 a week, plus free room and board on the boat. Then there's the other fella, the mentally challenged one. He's a workhorse. Puts in about 18 hours a day, does 90% of the heavy lifting around here. I give him $30 a week. He pays his own room and board, and come Saturday night, I buy him a bottle of Bacardi rum and a dozen Budweisers to help him cope with life. Oh, and he gets to sleep with my wife occasionally." Agent Thompson's pen froze mid-note. His eyebrows shot up, and he pushed his glasses up his nose, certain he'd misheard. "That's specific," he said, clearing his throat. "I need to speak with that second employee, the mentally challenged one." Riley grinned, his weathered face creasing like old canvas. He tossed the net aside, planted his hands on his hips, and said, "That be me, pal. What do you want to know?" So 2 men steal a flashlight and break out of a mental institution. They find themselves on the roof of the building with orderlies closing in. The men look and see there is an adjacent roof they might be able to jump onto. The first man runs and leaps over the gap, landing on the roof of the next building. "Come on, jump," he urges. The second man replies, "I can't. I'm too scared." The first man yells, I'll shine my flashlight across the roofs and you can walk on the light to me. I'm not a fool, exclaims the second man. You'll turn the light off when I'm halfway across. So, the mental institution just got a new shrink. And on his first day, he is shown around the hospital and introduced to the staff and patients. As he comes to the activity room, there is a group of patients sitting in a circle facing one another. One of them says, "Number 31." And the others start laughing. He notices that one of the patients, a young man, laughs much more than the others. Then another patient chimes in, "Number 107. And everyone's having a good laugh again. However, the young man is so amused that he's slapping his thigh and laughing much more than the others. The new shrink starts wondering what is going on. Once again, another patient says, "Number 10. The patients all start laughing again. By now, the young man is almost keeling over from laughter. And the shrink is now so curious that he goes up to one of the patients and discreetly asks him what they are doing. "We're telling jokes, Doc," the patient whispers back. "Oh, but it seems you're only mentioning random numbers." "Well, you see, we have been here a long time, and we've all heard the same jokes over and over, so we decided to save us some time by just numbering them all. So when someone says a number, the other ones remember which joke he is telling, and we all have a good laugh. It's very convenient." "Oh, I see," says the doctor hesitantly. "But what about that young fellow over there? Why is he laughing so much more than the others?" "Well, he's new here, you see, so he has never heard any of them before."